Hello again. Uh, Probably one of the most irresistible things to think about for a reader is their idea of the dream perfect scenario for reading and the most wonderful place to read. And this is a gift that has been given to us because there's been a tag created by Heather Reeds, and I've been tagged to do it, and also to take part by Margaret Pinard. And it's imagining all the most wonderful things about reading. It's called the Wildest Dreams book tag. So let's go. So the first question is your fantasy time and place to read a book. Well, I'm probably going to involve diagrams in this. Come with me to the west coast of Ireland, to Connemara, in a place that used to belong to a writer, Oliver St. John Gogarty, I think his name was. I'll have to put it up on the screen to get it exactly right. And I had stayed there a long time ago, and at the time there was somebody there who was obviously reading the proof for a book. Possibly she was an editor, and so she had been sitting around with this pile of paper reading it. It looked very intriguing, but the thing was I couldn't remember the name of the hotel, but I could remember the name of the writer whose house it used to be. So I looked him up on Wikipedia. Well, talk about an interesting life. And it mentioned, of course, his house, which had been made into a hotel. And it's called the Renville House Hotel. So if your imagination, if you come with me to my memory of what it is, it's still a hotel, still on the go. And you're on the west coast of Ireland. The next parish across to the west is going to be America. And it's this little house, and as you come up the drive, there's a little sign that says something like "No stress beyond this point," something like that. And it is what you feel like when you arrive. And the living room is where I have in mind that I would love to be reading again. And it was a very large room. It looked like two rooms because there were two fireplaces, and each in front of it had a big cosy settee. The fires were lit by staff, and you could ask for some tea and scones or coffee and scones. They'd be brought to you sitting there by the fire, looking into the fire. And all you need to do is add another book to the picture, and you've got my ideal life. Really big, comfortable settees. You could just almost set a home in, really big. And the floor, from memory, was wooden parquet as well. And there just was that sense of being looked after by other people and things being brought to you. So that is my ideal. Right, so that's the Renville House Hotel in Connemara. My fantasy personal library. Well, this took me to writing a little diagram and drawing things out. But basically, it's a version of the Renville House Hotel. It would be a room with two settees facing either side of a fireplace with, of course, a real fire. In the Renville House Hotel, it would be a turf fire, which is a little bit more nice for smell. But anyway, there would be two large settees facing each other, and then maybe a couple of armchairs as well. And the books in the room would just be up to halfway height so that I could have pictures above them and not feel like the shelves are towering down on me. And also there would be a projector, and so that one of the walls could be projected onto. One of the walls without books could be projected onto to show a film, so that friends could gather around and we could have a chat about a book, and we could also see the film of the book and discuss that as well. And the wall on which the projection would be made is going to be on casters, because we're talking fantasy here, we're not talking real life. And this whole wall would just come flush to the wall and reveal that behind it is a little art studio, a place for me to make art. And that also means it then becomes a whole party space in a sense. And this reminds me of Charleston House, where I visited it for a festival last year, and the studio space was wonderful, and you could just see that it would be a cosy place. It had a high ceiling, kind of pitched ceiling, and there was a nice not oil burning, but coal burning stove in there, and there was a comfy battered settee, and there were there'd be parties there, there'd be painting there, and then round the corner in the same room was a record player. So that was obviously the setup for Vanessa and Duncan Grant to have parties. Their house had so many people in it at all times, but that was kind of a cosy space you could imagine with some music blaring out, and yet during the daytime could be a quiet place where you make art. So that is almost like a suite of rooms, isn't it, really? But what's the point in cutting the corner whenever we've got all this space to play with? So those are my main things for a room, for an ideal reading room and library. But my library would be interspersed through the house, because of course the art books would be in the art studio side of that division, and then I think the other books, some of them would be through the house in different areas. I know a couple who live in a house which used to be a railway house, so it's a railway station, so it's a long thin building, and they would have different books in different areas, so which struck me as being a really good arrangement. And they had a lot of books. If they were all put together in one space, it would take a giant amount of space. But what they did was, in the kitchen they had a small bookcase which was maps and travel, and then the dining room was biographies, and then upstairs near the bedrooms were the novels, so that if you were having a night where you couldn't sleep very well, you just wanted something light to read, you could just pop out into the landing and choose what was there. And that struck me as quite a good idea. And I'm sure they had other books as well, because they were into science and history, but I can't quite remember where they fitted in the different rooms. But spreading your library through the house, it seems to me quite a good idea. Now, question number 3. Imagine that you have decided to build a bookshop, and then the questions are about what its name would be and what you would sell. Well, I cannot see how it's a way to make money. I think possibly this is linked to that you've got £1 million to spend on books, and what are you going to do with it? Possibly. I think it's really tough for a bricks and mortar bookshop. However, if I was going to have one, probably it would be second hand. It would be very like Leakey's in Inverness, which somehow manages to keep the doors open and is a wonderful place to visit. And I would have it, basically the space for it, in case you don't remember, I have various videos, but you walk in and it's a former church hall, so there's like a balcony around at the top, and then downstairs lots of books, but when you walk in there's a gigantic log burning stove right in the middle, and so it's cosy and warm. And there used to be a coffee shop which was on the upstairs balcony, remembered very fondly by those of us who were regulars, and I would have that in my fantasy one, which of course, remember, is not tied to the reality of having to make money. And I would still have that coffee shop. I think that's essential, to have spaces where you can sit with the book. In fact, in my coffee shop come bookshop, it would be so geared towards the clientele that there would be lots of chairs to sit in, big, deep, comfy chairs, and there would be a little trolley you could have, and you would put on those the books you wanted to have a look at, wheel them across to your chosen chair, sit down. There'd be good lighting, of course, as well, either natural lighting from a window behind or a proper light. And then you had a little bell on a table, and if you rang it, somebody would come and offer you tea and coffee and buns and different things, which you of course would pay for, but you wouldn't have to go far. You could sit comfortably, and if you realised you'd hit a rich seam of reading and books, you could just say, okay, this is going to be a coffee break time, and act accordingly. Isn't it tempting? Don't you want to come to my little bookshop? So the name of the bookshop, not quite sure, but it might be something as simple as Just Another Page, which is what we all say, don't we? Oh, if you've got a good book, just keep going, just another page. And the main thing is that it would not be so much for selling books as for experiences, for giving experiences. There would be groups for people who want to write, people who want to perform, poetry and read out, and there would be evenings where people would be encouraged who are not signed up authors, and it's a chance to hear something they're working on. And that, I think, would make it really truly worthwhile and fun to come along to. Let's see if I missed anything. I had to make a list because there was so much. No, the handbell and the chair, I think, were the real selling points for me. Question 4. One person with whom you could have a good conversation about books. Well, anybody in public reading a book is fair game to me to start a conversation along the lines of, what are you reading? Because I'm eager to know. I really am. And apart from that, in terms of speaking to someone about books, I would probably have a conversation with Malcolm Guite, who's a poet and who knows so much about so many books. And I love his channel he has. It's not formally a Booktube one. He doesn't engage with Booktube tags and so forth. It's in his name, Malcolm Guite, and it's well worth visiting, especially if you're interested in poetry. Question 5. If you won £1 million and you could only spend it on books or book-related items, well, what else would you want to spend it on? Let's be honest. That's the first thing that would come to me. How would you spend it? How would you spend it? Well, Steve Donahue had a good idea for this, to have books for kids and for people in prison, and various other people also considered that as well, which I think is wonderful. I would also like to do a writing retreat and run some with some people that I know who really could use the time and the space to write. They've got something they're trying to get to, and if someone else could host them, that would be great. And for that, I would book out Moniac Moor, which is a writing resort, writing place, a retreat place in the Highlands of Scotland, which is lovely. For myself, I would have a good reading chair and a lamp, possibly a chaise longue, and a cook who would cook me food so I wouldn't have to break off reading. Because remember, this is a complete fantasy thing. And I would run a writing programme where I would sponsor a writer for a year to research or write a book. And they would need to be a writer over 50 years old and a woman, because there's so few prizes for that. Most are for very young writers. So that would be an utter delight. And then I have a whole list of books, which I might just say a few to end this off, because I've got about 600 books on the list that I would love to get my hands on, both brand new and second-hand, mostly second-hand. And I take these lists and check them regularly against libraries to see if I can borrow them for free, or if they're second-hand, and if not, feeling that first brand new. So if I'll sign off with the lists, and that'll lull you to sleep sometime when you're bored. Those are my fantasy wildest dreams book tag. So here are some of the books I'd love to have. A Painter and a Poet, Conversations in Colour by Alice Mumford and Sue Lee. Alice brings some paintings, and the poems are by Sue Lee, and they sit on facing pages. And there's also conversations with the makers. So obviously that interests me because it's a mixture of words and pictures. Concrete Poetry, a 21st century anthology edited by Nancy Perloff, very recent. And it's concrete poetry is the way the words are set out in a page is important to the poem. They're set out in patterns or shapes. Vitamin C+, Collage and Contemporary Art by Faden. Again, a recently published book in 2023, so it's still a bit recent to get in a library. It features the work of 108 living artists in collage, and so I think the book is something to buy as a reference and an inspiration. Cinema and Painting, How Art is Used in Film by Angela Dalla Vacca, not sure how you pronounce that. Then The Poetics of Poetry Film, Film Poetry, Video Poetry, Lyric Voice, Reflection by Sarah Tremlett. is a recommended seminal text on combining poetry and visual moving images. So I really want that. Ivor Cutler, A Life Outside the Sitting Room by Bruce Lindsay, is a fresh biography of an eccentric Scottish musician. It came out in the year 2023. Ivor Cutler is surreal, he's smart, and he's down to earth, and he writes story songs. A book about writing for writers, Robert Graves and Alan Hodge, The Reader Over Your Shoulder, a handbook for writers of English prose. First published back in 1947, now back in print and recommended as useful for writers, so I want to get my hands on that. Yet another art history book about women abstract expressionist painters in America in the 1950s. 9th Street Women, Lee Krasner, Elaine de Kooning, Grace Hardigan, Joan Mitchell and Helen Frankenthaler. 5 painters and the movement that changed the world. And that's written by Mary Gabriel. One of them is the wife of Jackson Pollock, one of them was the wife of Willem de Kooning, but they were all very highly achieving artists in their own right, and I would love to read their stories. Fascinating thinker's biography. Jean-Luc Barret, Jacques and Raissa Maritain, Beggars for Heaven. Very interesting lives. Then another book edited by Angela Dellavace, Film Art, New Media, Museum Without Walls. And this is based on the idea back in the 1950s that André Bazin talked about the possibility of an art museum not tied to 4 walls in one place, and this book is examining if film and new media can be part of that. The next book is interesting for a particular reason. Frederick Buechner, The Remarkable Ordinary, How to Stop, Look and Listen to Life. And as I looked at this, I thought, actually, I'm going to have to buy it, so it's on order. And I'll let you know when I've read it what it's like. Next book is related to Dorothy L. Sayers, but also thinking about women of her time. It's called Mutual Admiration Society, How Dorothy L. Sayers and her Oxford Circle Remade the World for Women, which is a bit of a long and very high claims for a title, by Mo Moulton. Then we have Ordinary Matters, Modernist Women's Literature and Photography by Lorraine Sim. How women photographers and writers saw ordinary life through changes in their lives, like Great Depression and war and so forth. And the book tackles themes, things like street or gesture or the face. The next 2 books are going out of print, so I'm going to need to hasten to get them and buy them second hand. The first one is The Kitchen Revolution, A Year of Time and Money Saving Recipes, which has a lot to commend it for a title. It just sounds so practical, by Rosie Sykes and Polly Russell. I borrowed it from a library some years back, and actually I thought it was pretty good. One to have as a resource. Next book, Analysing Cubism, was written to accompany an exhibition back in 2013 of pioneering Irish artists involved in a particular style of cubism. Most of them are actually women painters. So Evie Hone, Mamie Jellett, Nora McGuinness, and it was held in AMA, which is the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Dublin. And I went to see the exhibition, and did I buy the catalogue at the time? No, I did not. So I'm reduced to looking for it second hand at high prices now. So the moral of the story is, if you go to an exhibition and you like it, buy the catalogue. Next book, Light Humour, Heath Robinson Contraptions, a guy known for designing the most long-winded ways of making something workable in a house. Just hilarious. Next one, still comedy, but also with a mixture of faith, so that's a bit more unusual maybe. Jesus Laughed, The Redemptive Power of Humour by Robert Darden. I hope I would get a few smiles and laughs out of reading that book. Next one is an anthology, but it has a lot of women comedians interviewed. Sizable Reflections, or women writers, Sizable Reflections, Big Women Living Full Lives, with Dawn French, Mary Margolyes, Jenny Murray, which are probably names better known in the UK. Controversial and hilarious. anthology of writing about being fat, but enjoying it. Possibly following on from that, more humour. Cake wrecks when professional cakes go hilariously wrong, and that's just a lovely book to look at and just laugh. Not humorous. Classic crime. The Face on the Cutting Room Floor by Cameron McCabe, based on solving a murder but on a film set, so I like the idea of the film location. Next, Joan Didion, We Tell Ourselves Stories in Order to Live. It's collected non-fiction, Everyman's Library Classics. And I would like to get into Joan Didion. I saw a fascinating documentary, an interview with her done by, I think it was her nephew, and this might be my chance to have a deep dive into what she's written. Next, Even Boland, Journey with Two Maps, Becoming a Woman Poet. Bread and Wine, A Love Letter to Life Around the Table with Recipes by Shauna Nyquist, which is apparently part cookbook and part spiritual memoir. So it's got a couple of interests for me combined into one, which is very efficient. And finally, Disappearing Ink, Poetry at the End of Print Culture by the poet Dana Gioia. These are the books I'm thinking of, and they are just the tip of the iceberg. Just 24 of many books I want. Feel free to play this list on repeat if it helps you get to sleep. Night night.